What's up, guys? As promised, here's the in-depth guide to DPSing as a Warlock in Season of Discovery. I'll talk about both the Affliction with Haunt build and the Fire Destro build, as those are the two main builds that we use currently at this level 25 cap. As this is a longer video, please use the timestamps to skip to whichever part of the video that you need. Before I begin, please check out the Warlock Discord, your one-stop shop for everything and anything Warlock related, and also check the stream out at Crix Vibes, where you can find me pumping on the Warlock, a Mage, a Warrior, and a ton of other classes. Let's get started. To start, let's talk about how Warlocks are performing. Right now, Warlocks are performing pretty well. We're middle of the pack compared to all the other classes. However, we beat all the casters and we only lose to the physical DPS, which is kind of expected, because at this level bracket, physical DPS are pretty stacked right now. I'm hoping at level 48 we go up a little bit more, but right now we're sitting about here. And out of the Warlocks, if you look at them, the Fire Destro build is the most damage that you can do right now. It is, I wouldn't say significantly over Affliction, because my friend Zardarko did an amazing run as Haunt the other day, where he got like World 8th or something like that. So you definitely have room to play with Affliction if you really prefer that Haunt build. And I prefer Haunt when I'm starting the raid out early, like when I'm pre-bis or I don't have the gear from the raid to really afford life tapping as much to use Fire. But all in all, once you get a little bit of gear, Fire is pretty insane. For your demons, this is an ongoing topic no matter what spec you play, whether you're running Affliction Haunt or you're running the Destro build. Right now at the time of this video, the top locks in the world are split between using Succubus and Imp, right? So you'll have some people in the Succubus camp and some people in the Imp camp. And when I look at the overall damage on the bosses, there's some bosses that Imps just do better, and then there's some bosses that Succubus do better. With the Imp on those fights, you need to take Improved Imp, because Improved Imp makes your Imp do more damage with this Firebolt, right? And also when you start weaving in Lake of Fire, if you're running the Fire Destro build, which you end up doing, which we'll talk about when we get to the rune section. But once you start doing this also buffs your Imp up by 40%, making your Imp do more damage. I personally just use the Succubus as it just feels like it's less I need to worry about. I just send the Succubus in and she does great melee damage and I don't have to worry about much. There definitely is room for Imp if you prefer the Imp. Like I said, they're going back and forth. Like currently right now, the top 2 or 3 are using Succubus, 4 and 5 are using Imp. And it just goes back and forth almost every day that I check these, it feels like. So I kind of feel like as long as you're using Improved Imp and your Lake of Firing as Destro, Imp definitely has a place. And if for those that just like using Succubus, just feel free to use Succubus. They both are great pets and you kind of can't go wrong with either of them. For the stat prio for both these specs are kind of the same. Obviously there's going to be a little bit of a difference here because one is fire and one is shadow, but more or less it's the same. And the first thing you want is spell hit. Spell hit is very, very, very easy to obtain because Blizzard just recently changed the boon of Black Fathom to give you 3% hit. And then if you use the Black Fathom mana oil, this will also give you 2% hit, making you achieve the 5% hit cap, which is pretty easy to obtain. You should have both of these in raid. You can get the boon of Black Fathom like we talked about. It drops in major cities like Darnassus if you're Alliance or Thunderbluff if you're Horde. And just get a boon from the reagent vendor for 20 silver like we said earlier, and then boon it to save it. And then of course the oils are on the auction house for pretty cheap. And you just make sure you have that weapon oil in the boon and you will have 5% hit, okay? After spell hit, this is when you want to start stacking spell power. Now you have a couple options for spell power. You have spell power, you have Shadow Wrath, and you have Fire Wrath. Obviously Shadow Wrath is more for the Affliction Haunt build, and obviously Fire Wrath is going to be more for the Fire Destro build. However, as you'll see in our gearing section, you will have some fire pieces because you are using Incinerate as your filler. Obviously spell power is the best thing that you can get in the raid. However, if you can't get spell power, a lot of your pieces are just going to go with the Fire Wrath or the Shadow Wrath. Now there's not Shadow Wrath for every slot, like the belt for example. Thus you would use a Fiery Wrath belt for Shadow, which we'll talk about once again in the future here. But yeah, like I said, spell hit, and then you want your spell power, Shadow Wrath, Fire Wrath, whatever, and then you want intellect. Crit just comes naturally. You can't really control how much crit you're getting outside of what little bit of crit you get from intellect yet. There'll be some crit pieces in the future, obviously. So spell hit, spell power, intellect, and then after that, it doesn't really matter with the stamina and the spirit and stuff. Next up, I want to talk about the talent build, okay? So this is the Fire Destro talent build. This is the best one in my opinion. And before you get mad that Improved Imp's not on here, just let me explain the talents because that is an option and you have a few flex points, which we'll get to in a second. To start, you're not putting up Corruption because it's not instant, so you don't even take Improved Corruption. And you also don't need Suppression because 1, this is only your Affliction spells, and 2, like I mentioned earlier in the stat prio section, you're already hit capping the boon and the oil. So on the destruction side of things, the first 5 points go into Cataclysm, which isn't the greatest talent in the world, but you're not taking Improved Shadow Bolt because you're never Shadow Bolting. So the mana reduction, while small, is still better than nothing. The next talent will be Bane, which isn't that good either, but at least it gives you a quicker cast time on your Immolate. I really wish this included Incinerate, but it doesn't for now. Aftermath itself is not that good, so you don't need to worry about this at all. And now for the rest of your points is when you have a little bit of option here. I personally just go 5 in the Devastation and 1 in the Shadowburn. Shadowburn is not that good, but you can get a little bit of damage from it as a finisher most of the time, or if you need to move and you don't need a life tap. So I kind of like it for that reason. You have all these flex points right now with these remaining 6 points, okay? I personally, like I said, I just go like this. I tried this one as well. You can also just put 1 point into the Improved Lash of Pain if you like it. That is okay. And then you can also put the 1 point into Destructive Reach if you really want as well, and that's all right. I personally just ran this. I like this. I think a lot of people are running this right now. It's just you kind of hope that you get the crits from this, okay? Next up, you can also go like this and put your points into Improved Imp. This is for your Imp guys. This is for Improved Imp, right? And your last point goes wherever you want, whether you want it in the crit or the Shadow Burn. It's up to you. But the base is this, right? You have the Improved Imp, and for this talent, you'd be using Imp, who gets buffed by Lake of Fire, okay? 40% damage on Lake of Fire. Your Imp can definitely run with this if you're running Improved Firebolt, but I haven't had that many problems, but also my kill times are kind of fast with my guild. So if you're in a guild with a little bit longer kill times, I probably wouldn't use those 2 points, and I would just put them into here. And also, this will still make your Imp do very good damage. That's for you Imp guys. If you're not running Imp, then you don't need to worry about this at all, and you just have those 3 points to put in wherever you want in here. Whatever version of what you want. If you want 2 into Improved Lash of Pain to reduce the cooldown of your Succubus Slash of Pain, you're more than welcome to do that. If you don't want to do that and you want to keep it in here, you can do that. Just like I said, it's complete flex on that point, but this is the one that I'm suggesting. For your runes for this build, for your leg rune, you're obviously going to use Incinerate and only Incinerate. There's nothing else you want for fire. And for your hand rune, you're obviously going to use Chaos Bolt because it's fire damage. Chaos Bolt does a ton of damage and it is beautiful when it crits. I'm critting for like 1600 damage on it with Lake of Fire down. It's pretty crazy. And then for your chest rune, you have some options here, which being Demonic Tactics for the 10% crit or Lake of Fire. I personally use Lake of Fire on every boss right now. Like I said, our kill times are kind of fast. I haven't had any problems with this, even on like the longer fights like Kelris or Akumai or however you say that boss's name. I haven't had that many problems with it, but if you find yourself having slower kill times, specifically on those 2 bosses, because they're kind of the longer ones, the Murloc boss Gale Heist is kind of long, but there's an intermission. He has these little intermissions where he phases out where you can get your life taps back, so I wouldn't really worry about that. But on the last 2 bosses, if you find yourself having mana problems and it's really annoying to you, or you don't have the gear yet to really run it, like some of the raid gear, then you could just run Demonic Tactics, and that's perfectly okay. But as soon as you have the gear to be able to run Lake of Fire and afford the mana for it, then I definitely would say to do this. And you could do it rather early. You don't need to be Biss. I have like 2 pieces of gear from the raid on here, and I'm able to do it, and the rest of it is just stamina and intellect gear. So the next build is the Affliction build, which is the one where you use Haunt instead of Chaos Bolt. Your first 5 points will go into Improve Corruption, because this is a pretty big talent as it makes your Corruption instant. You don't want to hard cast Corruption. You don't need any points in Suppression, like I said, because you had the Boon of Black Fathom and the Black Fathom Mana Oil to make you hit cap, so this is wasted. Your next 5 points can go into Improve Drain Life, which, to be fair, doesn't give you that much healing back per tick, but there's nothing really else to put here talent-wise. Your next 2 is going to be Improved Life Tap, just get some mana back. And then you have some points to put wherever you want in order to get Nightfall. But to be honest, there's no other points to put it there. So you can just put it into Amplify Curse and your Improved Curse of Agony. There's nowhere else to really put these points. I mean, Agony, some Warlocks can't use Agony because you're using Curse of Wreck. So if you're using Curse of Wreck, even up here, there's nowhere to put your points really. You're just kind of dead after Improved Life Tap. You could definitely run over here and put some points in the Cataclysm if you really wanted to get some mana back on your Incinerates, but it's really just not that worth it that much. You can go more of a support role and put some Hellstones down. Maybe you want some stamina, or maybe you want to run Imp and you can go Improve Hellstone and put some points into Imp, right? You can do whatever you want with this, but if you are running Agony, like a lot of people are, whether they're not Curse of Wrecking or they just have 2 Warlocks, you can put it in Improve Agony and that'll be the biggest DPS gains that you can get out of it. As for runes, you're going to run Incinerate because there's nothing else you can really run. Incinerate is way less mana than a Shadow Bolt, and it does more damage than a Shadow Bolt, making it hit pretty hard, and it's pretty good. Plus, you use Immolate as this build, and this buffs your Immolate up, so it's free damage on your Immolate. Everlasting Affliction is an option to keep up your Corruption, but the problem is you're going to be having to use Shadow Bolt, which is really bad at this level because we're going to get a new rank of Shadow Bolt soon once the phase lifts. And all this is going to do is refresh your Corruption, which means all it is saving you a global. The damage done from Incinerate will make up for you having to put that global up of Corruption. Plus, there's many times on the fights where you have to move, and when you move, if you don't need life tap, you can put up a Corruption. Demonic Pact, this really isn't that good right now. One, you're not really running a lot of casters, and Demonic Pact only gives it to your party members. So it gives you 13 spell power to your party members, right? And it's really just not that good. Yeah, it gives it to the healers too, but the healing's not really an issue. If you're in the guilds where you're running a few caster DPS, then feel free to use this. That's completely up to you, but that's more of a support side of things, and I honestly just think Incinerate is going to out DPS that, so I would just use Incinerate. Demonic Grace is cheeks, obviously. And the last one is Master Channeler. Master Channeler is just going to make your Drain Life a dot, makes you do much more damage. It's going to out DPS Demonic Tactics. You're not obviously going to Lake of Fire because your Affliction, and Soul Siphon is butt cheeks. But for those of you that think Soul Siphon's good, you can definitely feel free to use it if you want to. It's just really bad right now, and Master Channeler is way better. So the next section we'll go over gear, starting with Fire Destro. So just before I start, the Fire Destro gear and the Affliction Haunt gear are kind of the same. A lot of it is the same outside of swapping Fiery Wrath, the fire gear, for Shadow and a couple of Shadow pieces, but I'll still go over that when we get there. So to start, you want the Tattered Thinking Cape. This is just a really good helm, and there's not really that many other good options besides the Twilight Shawl. The only problem with Twilight Shawl is we no longer need the epic boots for the hit. So it's more DPS to actually run the Twilight boots to get that 2 set that you're mixing with the robes, right? So because of that, you will just simply use Rakamar's Tattered Thinking Cap. This is just really good spell power and has some good intellect on it too, of course. Until you can get this, you can just go ahead and use the engineering gloves. This is one of the reasons why I say you should be engineering, is so you can get these green tinted goggles. It's just a nice little previous option. There's not really a lot of options for helms. For your neck, you want the Jagged Bone Necklace. This is kind of one of the only necks that you can really get. The 7 Spirit, 2 Intellect, and 6 Spell Power. The other neck option from the raid is bad because it's just shadow damage. Obviously, you'll use this for shadow, which I'll talk in a little bit. But this, you just only want Jagged Necklace. And until then, you can just get one of the Eagles, which is kind of expensive right now. I believe it was like 70 gold on my server, which is absolutely crazy. Do not pay 70 gold for 4 int and 4 stamina. It's crazy. But yeah, if you can get it cheap or find it in the world, this is a great option just so you can get some more stamina to support your life tapping and of course intellect, which helps your crit and your mana pull out. For shoulders, really just use Magician's Mantle. This is 5 spell power, 9 intellect. These are your best option. Horde have an option with Frayed Mantle, Frayed Chestnut Mantle. The only problem with it is it's only Horde only, and also I would just use Magician's Mantle because you get 3 more intellect with it. It's the same amount of spell power. And this is also a BOE, so you can just buy it on the auction house. So it wasn't that expensive last I checked. For cloak, you just want a Fiery Wrath cloak. There's really nothing else that you can get. There's no point in using Sergeant's cloak. You just want fire damage. For robes, like I said, you want the Twilight Invoker's robes. This will be part of the 2-piece with the boots to give you 9 more spell power. This is just a really good option. Your previous before that would be like robes of Argol. You can even get black velvet robes if you want. Just some good intellect and stamina is always good to go. For your bracers, you want the Phoenix bindings. These are bind on equip, and these are 13 spell damage. These are going for about a gold on the auction house. So cheap and very worth getting. Don't even look at anything else. What's crazy is the Fiery Wrath options, right, are more gold than the Phoenix bindings, and I don't know why they are. I think people are just not paying attention. But you can get these for super cheap on the auction house right now. For the gloves, you just want the black fingerless gloves. These are from Twilight Lord Kelris, and these are 6 spell power, 9 int, 4 stamina. There's not really any other ones you can get. There's a pair of shadow ones, which we'll talk about later. You don't obviously want those. Your only other option is really going to be Fiery Wrath until then, which is great. So Fiery Wrath or Eagle until then. But yeah, you really want these black fingerless gloves. For your belt, you don't have a lot of options at all. You just literally just use Fiery Wrath. There's a Gamora Cinch, which I didn't put on here because I wouldn't say to get it. It's 8 stam and 8 intellect. You can get it if you can get it for free and can't afford the Fiery Wrath one, but you really just want a Fiery Wrath belt. For pants, you want Soul Leech pants. These are absolute best in slot with 11 spell damage, which is big. The only ones that come close to that are the Gaze Dreamer leggings for 7 spell power. Means you lose 4 spell power, so try to get these. Until then, you can just pick up some Fiery Wrath from the auction house, or of course some Eagle pants for the int and the stamina. For your boots, no shocker here that you want the Twilight Invoker shoes in order to go 2-piece with the Twilight Invoker robes. Until then, you can just go ahead and use any of the Eagles, or of course the Spider Silk boots, which are great too. For the epic boots, you can definitely use these if you have them. They're really good. They still give you 7 spell power. But to save you quite a bit of gold on making them, you can just get these from the raid. A lot of us already have these because we thought we needed the hit before they made the change to the boon of Black Fathom. But these are great boots to have otherwise. And if you want to get them or you can craft them, feel free to get them. Just try to get these eventually, right? You'll get more spell power in the long run. For rings, you want Signet of the Twilight Lord from Kelris in the raid. This is your absolute best in slot ring, and it pairs very well with the Advisor ring, which is the Horde version, and the Alliance version is the Lore Keeper's ring. These are both from being honored with your Warstone Outstriders or the Silverwing Sentinels, and just try to get either one of them as quick as you can. In the meantime, you can just use the Eagle for the 4 int, 4 stam, and there's no Fiery or Shadow Wrath for this for both sets. For trinkets, you do not have a lot of options at all. Obviously, the Invoker's Void Portal off the last boss from that quest item you get from Akumai, you want this right away, and it gives you 11 spell power. There's nothing much to say on that one, and it pairs with Rune of Perfection, which decreases the magical resistances of your spell targets by 10, which is pretty nice. You can also opt to use the Minor Recombobulator, which will give you some mana back on use. I still just use these, but until you get Invoker's Void Pearl, you can use Recombobulator. Wands are pretty boring right now. You can just get this wand from the raid, which is pretty nice off the Twilight Lord Kelris. We don't wand at all, but it gives you 5 int, which will give you the best stats out of anything else that you can get here, right? Until then, just feel free to use any of the stats that you can find. The Deadlight is nice for Shadow Res, and the Inscribed Gravestone at least gives you 1 spirit with some Shadow Res. And lastly, for the weapons, you want the Rod of Ancient Sleepwalker. This is the absolute best in slot wand, 15 intellect, 14 spirit, 5 Shadow Res, and of course the 26 spell power. Ignore this enchant that I forgot to swap. You would just put lesser intellect on it, but this is best. There's nothing else that you would even want. The closest thing you can get to it is the Dagger of Willing Sacrifice, to which then you would pair with Let me see, put it on, which then you would pair with the Tome of Cavern Lore. That's a pretty good option as well. But obviously you just want the staff, which would be the best thing that you can get, okay? Some options until you get some raid loot. To be honest, if you're fire, you can get a Fiery Wrath staff, which is nice. You can also go for a Fiery Wrath main hand and an offhand. This is also from the raid, the Sun Touched Crescent, which isn't that bad. To be honest, I would just go Fiery Wrath staff until you can get the Rod of Ancient Sleepwalker. As for the Affliction Abyss, it's kind of around the same thing. You're just going to swap a couple things around. The first thing you want to swap is the neck, right? You're going to want the Black Shroud Choker because this gives you 7 spell damage. And this will be a little bit more spell damage, 1, but a little bit more than Jagged Bone Necklace. But more importantly, there's no competition on this because only you want it, right? Well, and Shadow Priest, I guess. But Shadow Priests aren't really playing the game right now. But you have no competition on that, which is nice. Plus, it comes with some stamina, which isn't that bad. And then your bracers and your cloak, which were Fiery Wrath, are going to be Shadow Wrath, right? Obviously, nothing really to talk about there. Just put some Shadow Wrath on. Your chest is going to be the same, where you're going to run the 2 set. Weapon is going to be Rod, which obviously that goes without saying. You can also use a Shadow Wrath staff until you can get Rod. And you can also run that one-hand dagger, Willing Sacrifice, with the offhand of Tome of Cavern Lore, if you can get that from a raid. But really, you should just be trying to get Rod if you can. For gloves, you're not going to use the Black Fingerless because you actually have another Shadow Wrath piece called a Hand Wraps of Befouled Water. This will give you 3 more shadow damage, so you just want to get those as well. And the great thing about this is every healer and caster wants Black Fingerless, and you'll be able to get some free gloves right here. Belt is Fiery Wrath. You don't have any other options. There's no Shadow Wrath belt, and you're still spamming Incinerate, remember? So this will buff your Incinerate damage, and that turns out more than in using like an Eagle Belt or something like that. But feel free to use an Eagle Belt until you can afford the Belt of Fiery Wrath, because those are kind of expensive right now. Pants, you want Soul Leech pants, nothing crazy there. This is just the most spell power you can get. You obviously want this. This is off of the last boss. Gaze Dreamer is the second best, but you lose 4 spell damage. And until you can get either one of them, you can use a Eagle Belt for 7 stam and 7 int, or you can just use a Fiery Wrath pants, because there is once again no Shadow Wrath pants yet. So you can just use the fiery damage to buff your Incinerate damage, or go int stam. That one's up to you. Boots obviously are 2 pair with the robes. Rings are the same as fire. You want the Signet of the Twilight Lord, and then you want Lore Keeper's Ring, which is Alliance, and the opposite for Horde is Advisor's Ring. Until then, you can swap an eagle on there or whatever. Trinkets are the same because there are no trinkets. You want this from the last boss, Invoker's Void Pearl, and you can use Minor Recombobulator in the meantime to get some mana back. Wands are the same as well, just Phoenix Ignition for the 5 int, and you can use whatever until the meantime. And then that'll be it for the Shadow Abyss. For professions, none of them are actually mandatory. However, I always highly suggest engineering because that'll help you craft that helm, the green tinted goggles, for some free stam and spirit while you're waiting for one of the raid pieces to drop. But also you can craft heavy dynamite, which is some pretty good damage. It does more damage than an Incinerate, and it does it in AoE, so it'll help your AoE damage out. Plus it gives you something to throw on a boss, so it's pretty nice. Tailoring is no longer mandatory because you don't need the epic boots for the hit anymore, but feel free to go tailoring. I would just suggest picking up a gathering and trying to make some gold. Maybe you want mining for your own engineering, or however you want to do it. That one's up to you. But as of right now in this phase, I wouldn't call professions mandatory for DPS Warlocks. Next up is the rotation, and obviously for single target rotation, Affliction and Fire will have different ones. For Affliction, I like to precast Incinerate, and then I haunt. I know a lot of people choose the haunt first, but I personally like that I can Incinerate precast because you have a cast and then it travels, and by the time that you press haunt after Incinerate, they both land around the same time. And then after that, I Corruption. Now, while I cast Haunt and Corruption, I'm already moving up towards the boss because Drain Life only has a 20-yard range instead of a 30-yard range, meaning that you want to Drain Life as soon as you're in range. And then as soon as that Incinerate goes off, I'm already moving up and pressing Haunt and then Corruption, and by then I'm usually in my 20-yard range, and I would press Drain Life. After that, I press Immolate, with Immolate being my last priority on dots. If something happens and you're running low on mana, Immolate's the first thing that I'll drop off, right? After that, I'll put my Curse up. Obviously, Curse of Wreck if you have to, but if you're blessed enough not to have the Curse of Wreck, make sure you Curse of Agony. And also make sure you use your Amplify Curse, Curse of Agony, if you are using Amplify Curse. This is very easy to forget, but also very easy to handle because you can make a macro that is as simple as /cast Amplify Curse, drop a bar, /cast Curse of Agony, and you will never forget. After that, I just spam Incinerate while keeping all my dots up. Also, make sure to use your Nightfall procs. You might find yourself lucky enough to get a bunch of Nightfall procs because it procs off of Corruption and your Drain Life. And since you should be casting Drain Life all the time, you want to make sure not to miss out on any Nightfall procs. It's included in the WeakAuras package I'll talk about later, and I'll also put a separate WeakAuras for it as well. Now, a couple important things is to never clip your dots. This means, simply put, if you have 2 seconds left on your Corruption, don't apply a new Corruption. Wait till the Corruption falls off completely, otherwise you're just wasting free damage. Another thing to always do is always be casting. We call it the ABCs of being a caster. you should always be casting, right? There's plenty of times on these fights where you have to move from a mechanic or for whatever reason, cast something. Whether you're reapplying a corruption if your corruption is falling off, or my favorite thing to press, life tap. You can always use mana in this raid, as you guys know, and you want to minimize life tapping while you're casting as much as you can. So use any opportunity of moving to press life tap. For fire, the rotation is a little more simple, but also you have to do something we call lake weaving, and that's pretty much just making sure Lake of Fire is down under the boss as much as you can throughout the fight. We just like to use the term lake weaving because it sounds cool. Pretty much to start, I will precast and then incinerate, and I will always precast and incinerate. People are precasting Chaos Bolt, which I think is not smart because you're not getting that 25% fire damage buff from incinerate, so why would you Chaos Bolt? So I personally precast and incinerate, and then my next button will depend largely on where the boss is. If the boss is already in position, like some of the bosses are, where you're going to pull and they're going to stay there, I will immediately Lake of Fire into a Chaos Bolt into an Immolate. I Chaos Bolt before I Immolate because Immolate doesn't really do that much damage. Chaos Bolt is mega damage, and you also want Chaos Bolt to get on cooldown as soon as you can so you can get it right back up and cast it again. After I Chaos Bolt, I then Immolate. After that, I will Curse. Obviously, Curse a Wreck. If you don't have to Curse a Wreck, I personally don't Curse a Agony. I don't think it's worth it. I could be completely wrong on this one. I just personally don't like the feel of Curse a Agony, even if it's going to last 24 seconds. I'd rather be casting Incinerate or Chaos Bolt or whatever. And plus, it's a little more mana that you will have to use. And with this build being so mana heavy, I'd rather save every little bit of mana that I can because Lake of Fire is really, really expensive. But a good time to use the curse is when you're moving. Like I said in the previous section, if you're moving, you should always be casting something. That's a good time to put Curse of Agony up. Anyways, after that, I just spam Incinerate while keeping Immolate up on the boss, my Lake of Fire down under the boss, and Chaos Bolt on cooldown. As I just said, make sure you're always casting something when moving. This is a good time to use your Shadow Burn. If you happen to spec in the Shadow Burn, it's great to use while you're moving. As is Curse of Agony if you have to move and then the boss is still going to be up for 24 seconds. However, my favorite thing to do when I move is Life Tap. You can almost always use the mana when Life Tapping unless it's one of the short fights, all right? So if you're on Kelris and you need to move from the little shadow circles, you just Life Tap when you're moving because no matter what, you will end up using that mana, and you'd rather do it while you're casting. Using Kelris as an example, if you're casting and you get the Shadow Nova thing under you, that's when you can put a Lake of Fire down and then move out of the Shadow Nova because putting the lake down costs a global. So you can put it down and then move, and then during that move, your global will be done, and you can go back to casting your big spells like Incinerate and Chaos Bolt. For AoE, there's not much you can really do. For both specs, you can opt to go Shadow Volley and just spam Shadow Volley, which is good damage, just the best way you can get AoE. Rain of Fire, even with Lake, is pretty bad AoE damage. The trash mobs die so fast in here, I kind of wouldn't even try to min-max AoE. But obviously, use a heavy Dynamite if you have it, and either Shadow Bolt Volley or just Lake of Fire and just spam Rain of Fire. For Addons WeakAuras, after this video is done, I'm going to start working on my UI and add-on video next. So make sure you follow the channel so you can see it pop up when I'm done with it. For the main WeakAura, I like to use a hub like this. This is just from Foji right here. I know that you have to be Patreon subscriber to get this. It's like $3 or $4, but I will link another one in there underneath him if you don't feel like paying the money for it. Other than that, the only one that I would say is mandatory is a Lake of Fire WeakAura. This one is made by Sardako. So shout out to Sardako. There will be a link to his chat in there as well. And then I'll have the WeakAura linked in the description below. And then just anything to track your dots. I'm not going to go over all my add-ons right now, but I'll do that in the next video. But those are the basic ones to be able to raid that you're going to need. Well, that's it for this one, guys. I really hope this video helped somebody. And if it helped you, please, like I said, leave a follow, leave a like, put a thumbs up there, and check out the stream if you want to. I really enjoy making these Warlock guides, and I'm trying my hardest to do the best I can at them and get even better at the game to provide you guys with good information. This will be the last of the longer videos, and now they'll be a little bit shorter, like as we talk about other specs and stuff, to avoid people having to click these long videos and watch them. The meta is changing all the time for Warlocks, and as they change and get better, I will obviously have updates for you guys. Please leave a comment below if you disagree with anything or if you have any other questions. And of course, you can go to the stream and ask any questions. I'm there almost every day, and I enjoy helping everybody out, okay? So don't feel bad about asking questions. If you watch this and you didn't like something I said, well, that sucks for you. Leave it in the comments and we can figure it out together. I don't just make all this information up. This is from a lot of theory crafting from the Warlock Discord. And of course, all of us who are ranking pretty well right now on logs using these practices, okay? So I hope to see you guys in the next one, and thank you guys for watching. Peace.